Hey there, this is your teacher, Mr. H, and you're watching History in a Hoodie. Today's episode is about systems of government in Africa, where we will learn all about how countries are organized. I can't wait to find out, so let's get this show started. What are we learning about today? The standard for today's lesson asks the students to explain the role of citizen participation in autocratic and democratic governments. Also, we will describe the two predominant forms of democratic governments, parliamentary and presidential. Finally, we will explain the role of citizens in choosing the leaders of South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya. Before we start, let's go over some vocabulary for today's lesson. An autocracy is a system of government by one person with absolute power. A democracy is a system of government by the whole population, typically through elected representatives. Freedom of the press means the right to share information in print without censorship by the government. State-run media is major news organizations that are controlled financially and editorially by the government. Propaganda means information of a biased and misleading nature used to promote a political cause or viewpoint. In Africa, just like the Middle East and the rest of the world, governments can be described based upon how many people are in charge, just one, or every single citizen through the vote. An autocratic government has a single ruler. This single ruler has the ability to do anything they want, make laws, collect taxes, and spend money without consequences. Autocrats typically rule until death, so there is no incentive for the ruler to work to improve the country. Until at least the people start calling for the ruler's head. The most common forms of autocratic governments today are absolute monarchies and dictatorships, both of which are found in Africa today. A democracy means literally rule by the people. The people rule by holding frequent elections to determine who will run their government and represent their wants and needs at the highest levels. In a true democracy, the people would all vote on every issue brought up to the government. But this is highly burdensome as thousands of laws are considered every year. Instead, most democracies are republics, or representative democracies, where the voters choose leaders to write, read, and vote on the laws. Most African countries say they are democracies, although some instead are quite autocratic. If a country is a democracy, you will need to be able to identify whether it is a presidential system or a parliamentary system. Remember, sometimes the title of president is just thrown around and can cause confusion about the type of government you're actually investigating. So, to simplify things, you need to answer one question to determine your form of government. The person who has the final approval of the laws in a country, how did they get their job? In a presidential system, like our own government in the USA, the person who has final approval of the laws got their job by an election of the citizens. This is called direct election, where all presidential candidates appear on voting ballots, and whichever candidate has the greatest support of the voters gets the job. In a parliamentary system, the leader of the government does not appear on the ballot for citizens' votes. The people elect their representatives to the legislative branch. After the election of representatives has concluded, the representatives select from themselves one leader in a separate vote. Sometimes this person is called a prime minister, but other countries have given this leader different titles like party leader or even president, which can become confusing. So this comes back to the previous question to guide your decision. The person who has the final approval of all laws of a country, how did they get their job? If the citizens voted for them, then it's a presidential system. If only the representatives voted for them, then it's a parliamentary system. So what? What do these government systems look like in African countries? South Africa is a parliamentary democracy. This means that the people elect a legislature, the Parliament of South Africa, and the legislature chooses the head of government. This head of the government is called the president. This means that Nelson Mandela's name did not appear on voting ballots for president of the country back in the 1990s, but instead he was selected by other representatives to serve as president of the country. South Africa's elections are free and fair, and people have many freedoms, such as the right to a trial, right to privacy, and freedom of speech. As we know, however, those rights did not always exist in this country like during the apartheid era. Nigeria is a presidential democracy. This means that it has a head of government, the president, and a separate legislature, the National Assembly of Nigeria, that are both directly elected by the people. Nigeria guarantees freedoms of speech, expression, and the press. However, the government has recently passed laws limiting press freedom and has been harassing journalists covering the corruption in the government and military. Additionally, in northern Nigeria, the terrorist group Boko Haram operates freely and unchecked, thus limiting people's ability to exercise their rights in that region. Kenya is also a presidential democracy. Kenya also has a head of government, the president, and a legislature, the Parliament of Kenya, that are both directly elected by the people. Kenya guarantees freedom of speech and the press. Similarly to Nigeria, there is a large and independent media, but government forces also routinely harass members of the press, causing the press not to report on some things the government does poorly. Both Kenya and Nigeria rate lower than other more established democracies because of their treatment of press freedoms, making them, quote, partly free democracies. Now what? What am I going to do with this information? A government's treatment of the free media and news reporters is a pretty clear identifier of how free a country truly is. The job of the news media is to tell us everyday citizens what our leaders are up to and how it will affect us. They are the most significant check on corruption of a government, and the more reporters are dismissed, harassed, or controlled by the government, the more a government can get away with whatever they want without the citizens knowing, protesting, or exercising their most important control, voting. He who pays the musician chooses the song. What that means is that when it comes to reporting in a country like Nigeria, whoever pays the reporters gets to choose the stories that are told. In that country, there is a state-run news network that essentially runs constant positive propaganda in support of the ruling leaders. If that was the only news you watched, you would think things in Nigeria were going quite well. But Boko Haram, the terrorist group, is kidnapping school children for ransom and suicide bombers, and attacking houses of worship in Nigeria. I wonder how much the government has to pay to hush that up. If you want to know how well a government is doing, look to the relationship between national news reporters and a country's leadership. If a leader is constantly respectful of freedom of the press, willing to have public debates on issues, and can respectfully and clearly articulate their point of view to reporters, then and only then can you trust that individual freedoms are secure in that country. You don't see that happening in Nigeria, nor in North Korea, China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and many other countries around the world with limited freedoms. Wow, so learning about African government systems is really important for us to understand. I'm glad we learned it today. Are you ready for some review questions? In which form of government are the citizens most likely to directly participate? In the Egyptian parliamentary elections, there are sometimes as many as 18 different political parties on the ballot. Everyone over the age of 18 is allowed to vote. Based solely on this information, how would citizen participation in Egypt's government be categorized? Parliamentary and presidential forms of governments have many similarities. What is one major difference? Republic of Kenya. Freedoms are written into the Constitution, but government is dominated by the president. There have been improvements in citizens' rights in recent years. Republic of Nigeria. Citizens are able to participate in open elections, but corruption has been a major issue as leaders have taken bribes for governmental favors. Women are not equally represented in the government. Citizens cannot always rely on court systems to protect rights. Republic of South Africa. Personal freedoms are numerous. Apartheid has ended and literacy rates are high. Based on the information provided in the chart, which country has the lowest degree of personal freedoms? Republic of Kenya. Freedoms are written into the Constitution, but the government is dominated by the president. There have been improvements in citizens' rights in recent years. Republic of Nigeria. Citizens are able to participate in open elections, but corruption has been a major issue as leaders have taken bribes for governmental favors. Women are not equally represented in the government. Citizens cannot always rely on the court systems to protect rights. Republic of South Africa. Personal freedoms are numerous, apartheid has ended, and literacy rates are high. Based on the information provided in the chart, which country has the highest degree of personal freedoms? I hope all of you learned a lot from today's episode of History in a Hoodie about governments of Africa. If you did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Just kidding, I don't care about that stuff, but do make sure you study this lesson. Bye now.